talk about everything here on Chronic Conversations. Welcome. Let's get into it. It's been a while since I talked to you guys. I recently got a job, so yeah, things have been quite busy. I'm trying to find a balance so that I have got time for you guys, and I've also got time for really being effective in my job. So, anyways, that's my own personal life. Let's talk about what we're gonna be talking about today. So the first thing we're gonna talk about is the current Iran and Israel and U.S. conflict. Um, let's um, basically reduce down to who is winning this particular war. Right, we're just gonna take it on a surface level because I've been seeing a lot of people having that conversation. Right, the funny thing about this whole, well, there's nothing funny about war, but the interesting thing about this Iran, US, and Israel conflict is that we don't know what the US objectives are. And because we don't know what the US objectives are, they're always claiming that they're winning. And we don't have any way to evaluate what winning is for the US, right? Because from a layman's perspective, right? Because I'm not a political analyst, but when you're looking at it, I'm seeing the amount of money the US have used to go up against Iran, and I'm seeing that they have spent billions. Like in less than, I saw a statistic, was it less than 3 days? 3 days of this war, 3 weeks of this war. Between the two, I'll put the statistic up. The US had already spent over twice as much money than South Africa spends the whole year. That's in a small period of time, that's how much the US has been spending money. And when you look at Iran, if we had to basically do a cost evaluation between how much Iran has spent and how much the US has spent, you get to see that Iran has spent way less. Even in terms of the way the US have intercepted Iranian missiles, like the Iranian missiles, you're looking at them costing at around 200,000 US dollars to intercept that missile. Um, you're looking at the US spending over millions of US dollars to intercept a very, in relation to how much the US equipment is, a very cheap type of drone, very cheap type of missiles that is being, obviously the US is using a lot more equipment, a lot more expensive equipment just to take down the Iranian missiles and drones. So you can get to see that, man, the US are losing a lot of money here. And for Donald Trump to come out in so many interviews saying, man, we're winning this war, I don't see it from a financial perspective. From a military perspective, right? Again, ties back to the money, man, because the U.S. is spending money, right? The U.S. is spending money, and when you look at from a military perspective, it's the U.S. is looking weak, right? The U.S. used to look really strong. Like I always, like if you see my previous videos, I was saying that the U.S. have the capability to really wipe out Iran. But as this war has been progressing, I'm starting to have second thoughts on that because Iran, the way in which they've strategically managed to know the US's pressure points to say, listen, we're gonna close down the Strait of Hormuz so that no oil is gonna be distributed. Okay, we're gonna bomb every Middle East country that has a US base. So from a military perspective, man, Iran looks like they're winning there too. I don't see an aspect of this where the US look like they're winning. I don't see it. And especially now, like with the US, when Donald Trump when this war began and they took out Ali Khamenei, I think a lot of us were like, damn, the US doesn't play. They've already taken out the supreme leader. But again, that ends up looking like another defeat for the US because they took the supreme leader out and then another supreme leader comes back on top. That same supreme leader is the son of the previous supreme leader that they took out. So again, the objectives of the US, you can't really evaluate what winning is for them, right? And for Iran, they look like they've been winning because they've held a strong political system, right? They lost a lot of their key leaders, but they found a way to replace those key leaders. They're still somewhat of a strong governmental system. It doesn't look like there's gonna be an overthrow of the government. It doesn't look like there's gonna be an overhaul of the particular system. The same system is in place. Some are even arguing. I once made a video on TikTok that some are even arguing that the son, Mujtab Khamenei, is worse than his father. That is more stricter in terms of Islam. Is more stricter in terms of protecting the system, right? And when you put into context that Ali Khamenei, his father, he had a he had a tendency of protecting the system, and protecting the system ultimately means that, let's say, if you're a civilian and you went up against the government, you would lose your life. There were protests that happened against, like, there's so many examples. I've got the 2019 example, right? Some people were protesting against fuel prices. People lost their lives. The police came and they had a crackdown on those people, right? There have been instances where students have protested against the government, and they too have had the police and the military, obviously going there and making them lose their lives, right? And this was all under Ali Khamenei. And now, when you have certain reports that are coming out saying that some people are saying that his son is worse than that, then it's an interesting prospect that we're currently going to see with Iran. Not just for this war, but if how is Iran going to shape up with this current political system? But that's another topic for another day. If we're going back to, is Iran winning this war? As I said, the system, if I tie it back, the system has remained stable, even regardless of the fact that they lost their big leaders in this particular country. They're still strong. Now, it's going to be interesting to see how the US are going to try and backtrack. Now, the reason why I'm saying it's going to be interesting to see how the US is going to try and backtrack is because the US, Donald Trump has been hinting that the US is losing and the US are probably going to want to, pull out of Iran. And that is um, it's an interesting thing that we're probably going to see. How is the US going to tuck their tails behind themselves and move away from the Middle East, and what repercussions is that going to have for the US's reputation within the world? Because, damn, like, the US has always been known like the big bad wolf, that you don't want to mess with the US. But the way in which Iran has had them having sleepless nights, it's gonna be an interesting world, seeing how the US loses so much of their credibility right now, especially with their alliances with NATO. With a lot of people are saying that NATO is going to be weak, very much weakened by this particular incident. Uh, who's the British Prime Minister not wanting to join in on the war yet the US and Britain are allies. It's going to be a very interesting future for diplomatic relationships between the US and its allies, in terms of Britain, in terms of France. Yes, it's going to be very interesting times that we are going to see in the future.